I'm going to start. Usually I start by saying, hello, my name is Cathy McMillan and I am dyslexic, so that you all know that that I am, because it is an invisible disability. And I do refer to it as a disability, even though lots of people like to say difference. The reason is that disability word actually ties it to rights within the School Act, rights within post-second, like that's how you get your rights. So there's no disputing that it's that it can be diagnosed through the DSM-5, that it's in the DSM-5 and all that kind of stuff. So I tend to usually say disability. Earlier on, like my kids are now 22 and 25, both have been diagnosed with dyslexia. I know, like in the early days, I used to write difference on the IEP. I used to write all kinds of things, everything but learning disability. I think because of whatever shame I was feeling at that moment. But to be honest, right up front, the easiest way to get around dyslexia is actually owning it. And part of owning it is understanding what it is, how it presents for yourself, and how you want to describe it to people, or you have to figure out your own way of dealing with your own dyslexia, just like any other thing. Kind of like if you're an alcoholic, I'm not comparing it exactly because that's what you want to compare it to, but you know, the best way to get over something or understand something about yourself is own it and be around people that are going through the same thing. So that's the explanation about why I start the way I do my presentations. Anyways, so to get started and to get you in the mood and for you to understand how dyslexia affects people, I'm going to do some simulations. These are simulations that I do for parents, and I also do for teachers, so that it brings up an understanding for what dyslexia is, and how it might present, and why people or why kids in a classroom might act the way they do when they have dyslexia. So it gives you an idea of what you're looking for if you want to sort of understand the signs you might be looking for a kid that might be presenting with dyslexia. So remember, this is a safe place, and the number one thing I am trying to make you feel is frustrated. So remember that. This is not a critique or judgment on teachers or anything like that. This, I'm trying to make you feel frustrated, fatigue, stressed out, all those things. So my language or my tone or things like that is intended to give you stress. It's not representative of maybe what a teacher might be saying. So that's sort of my disclaimer part. I don't want anybody to think I'm picking on teachers. Usually when somebody is feeling insecure about something, and it might not be because of dyslexia, it might be the way someone is feeling about the way they look. When you say have a big pimple, you get a big pimple, you go to school, you automatically feel like everybody's looking at it, right? That's the way you feel when you have a big pimple. Same with dyslexia. You feel like it's sticking out there, everybody notices, and every comment in the classroom is all about how slow you are, how you don't get it, as you know, that type of thing. So when we're sensitive about things, we're always looking, or we're very sensitive about what people are saying. So another disclaimer, I am simulating how to make you feel inferior in a classroom. So don't take my words as teacher bashing, please. All right, so we will go to the next slide here. Not quite sure. There we go. So expect to be uncomfortable, frustrated, emotional. Leave with an understanding of what dyslexia is and what dyslexia is not. So this kit is actually a kit designed by Kelly Salmon Hurley and Tracy Block-Zaretsky. They came to Surrey in 2018. They've actually come twice for me, and we did presentations in Surrey. It was awesome. We had like 400 teachers in each session. And just a little bit about Dyslexia BC. We're a grassroots parent-led organization in British Columbia, and we're worried about limited access to educational interventions for dyslexia within the public and private education systems. We became an organized movement in the spring of 2014, and our mission is to raise dyslexia awareness, empower families, and inform policymakers on best practices to identify, remediate, and support students with dyslexia. So we've been advocating for universal definition for dyslexia, mandatory teacher training, screening for dyslexia as early as kindergarten, mandatory dyslexia remediation programs, and access to assistive technology. So I think we'll start with a reading simulation first. I'm going to give you each a minute to read this. So I'll just set my timer right here. Go ahead and read it, and I'm going to ask you questions. So please pay attention. This is the teacher voice. Please pay attention and be ready for questions at the end. Okay, go. Okay, time. Okay, I'm going to open it up for some questions here. Does anybody want to put their hand up? Karen, you're smiling. Do you want to answer? Did you have any strategies that you used while you were reading this?
Well, I skim read fairly fast, and then I go back and look at it again.
Okay. And was this easy for you?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Can I get someone else to answer? I can't see who's here. How about Ian? Did you find this easy?
No.
No.
Well, I mean, I worked my way through it, kind of similar strategy to Karen, but the sentences structure and how the information's laid out is definitely confusing. So I same as Karen, I did a skim and then came back and
Okay. Because
I mean,
it's probably boring too, right?
Well, you might have picked two bad examples. I grew up, my parents developed the diploma exams, or my mom developed diploma exams for English. And so I grew up reading weird stuff all the time. And my dad did neuropsychology and ran tests on me to get a normative kid. So I'm used to reading things like this and going, well, what's going on with this scenario? And why is it weird to read? And okay, like, so.
Okay. But
sorry.
How was it for you to read? Was it easy or not?
Relatively easy, but it's written in a confusing way, right? Like we're missing some bits. The sentence structure doesn't always make sense. The flow of the paragraphs are,
probably written by a dyslexic, probably. Anyways, okay. So what strategies did you use? You just skimmed, or did you use
similar to Karen? I skimmed, kind of got the gist, and then came back.
Okay. Okay. So now we're going to move to a passage that's a little bit harder here. Here we go. So the first two paragraphs, I can be an I or an E, and a P can be, my thing is, P can be a P or a T. So I'm going to give you a minute to read. And And I'm going to be asking questions at the end. So please pay attention and I'll get back to you at the end. Here we go. Okay, you can stop. There's the timer. So Mark, I'm going to ask you the first question here. Mark Smeets. So did you find this one easy?
No, not even close.
Not even close.
No, it was too hard. The way oh gosh, it's only because Cathy and I know each other too. The top part where everything is laid out, like I can't pick. I'm trying to organize in my brain visually where things, like trying to piece those things. So the I can be an I or an E, the P can be a P or a T, but in my brain, that's not computing to what I'm reading on here. I can't make that switch. And that's probably an ADHD thing too for me. So, but looking at the fonts and everything else, like the font and the type, it also isn't a great font for me to read either. I'm struggling with that piece of it because everything looks like a blob, like it's kind of blobbish.
Okay, so you didn't come up with any strategies.
No, as soon as I hit that first line, I gave up. I just because I couldn't wrap my head around visually figuring out those lines. It's too hard. It's too jumbled into one thing.
Well, it's interesting you said gave up because that's what happens with dyslexic kids. They just give up when they can't compute it. So David, it says that it got easier for you. Did you find a strategy that worked for you?
I wouldn't go that far. It's just
Okay.
as I was just letting my brain just run with it, and I could sort of start to remap things as I went, but I was still going from super, super slow to fairly slow.
Okay.
But I could feel I was sort of
Making
I
progress.
might have been able to get there eventually, but boy, it would have taken a lot of
Effort, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So do you think, how long would it have taken you to give up, do you think, or you just would have got more resilient and gone through it?
I might not have given up. I'm not sure though.
You're not
If
sure.
it was much more than this though, more
Okay.
likely.
Okay. Sandra. You got through half. Did
Yeah,
you
I
have a
got through
strategy?
about half of it. I think basically like some of the longer words were easier to figure out because they had a lot of other letters in it.
Okay,
It's the P's and I's.
right.
So
it's easier to guess because of the longer
yeah,
words, right?
yeah. And then also the shorter words like the and to that are common words.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you a little bit about this
And
exercise.
Cathy,
Yeah.
Cathy, Ishi has his hand up.
Okay, Ishi, go ahead, Ishi.
Yeah, I found this actually really fascinating. I was almost unable to start.
Yeah.
It took me probably half the time to get through the first sentence. Then once I kind of started to look at the entire sentences at a time, I was actually able to start reading very quickly, and I got about 3/4 of the way through. And it was actually, I found reading that way was actually I accepted the mistakes in this one, whereas in the first one I was looking for all of the typos and getting stuck at it. There was at least 3 typos that I couldn't get past in the first one.
Okay, because it was so much harder, you were
Because I just
focusing
accepted
on
that this was, yeah, I just accepted there was constant typos. I was able to just sort of make sense of it somehow.
Well, that's probably why dyslexics couldn't care less about all the typos and that kind of thing, right? It's just small potatoes for them. Mark, did you want to say something else?
No, the only thing I think and not that I don't think we've talked too much about it before, but in terms of, because my son's also, he's undiagnosed dyslexic as well. We're wondering about our daughter too, to a point, but now that I know that there's mistakes in there as well, it's like, oh, okay, that makes it even harder to determine things. But I just wonder how much of it is, for me at least, it's that working memory side of things that
Correct.
ADHD brings. Yeah.
That's correct. So the people who actually got through it with no problems probably have a better working memory than us dyslexics. So dyslexia comes with a few things, usually working memory issues. They see that there's a bit of a misconception that we see differently. We see exactly the same thing as everybody else. It is a language processing issue. So somehow you can verbally understand or by hearing language, but trying to pull it off the paper is a totally different thing, and our brains are not intuitively wired for language. So and then if you combine that with the working memory thing, and that's why dyslexics have trouble with reading. So letters like B, D, P, and Q, they're all the same shape. When a dyslexic looks at a letter P or Q, they sit there and they go, is that a P or a Q? And so if they have to do that for every single word and try to figure out which letter that is, imagine trying to remember what you've read, by the time you get to the end of a sentence. So in a classroom where a teacher might be saying, now read this for comprehension, remember, 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 they are literally just having trouble remembering what they've read, let alone keeping the question part of it, as an outcome once they finish reading. So that's something you really have to remember when you have a classroom that might have, and a classroom probably has at least 1 or 2 dyslexics in every classroom, because it is 1 in 5. Severity is a whole different ball game. It comes from mild to profound. So in any given classroom, you could have 3 to 5 dyslexic kids. They might not all present as being severe, but they may be there. So an easy way around this would be to provide audio versions, so that people can, or individuals can listen if they want, instead of just reading out loud in class. So we will go on to a writing assignment here. Go to my chat here. Won't do the round robin. Okay, we're gonna do one where you have to write. So let's do one where you've got your pen and your paper. I want you to take your pen and I want you to put it in your non-dominant hand. So if you're right-handed, put your pen or pencil in your left hand. If you're right-handed, please put your pencil in your left hand. Did I say that right? I think you get the gist of it. And I'm going to dictate some. How many of you remember when your teacher used to dictate spelling sentences to you? Well, that's what we're going to do. I'm just getting my sentences here. I want everybody to pay attention because I have a meeting at lunchtime. So as soon as we're done, we're going to pack up and go for recess. So please pay attention. Okay, I'm going to start the dictation. Sentence number 1. Ben went to the store for milk. Ben went to the store for milk. Number 2. Peter studied for his science test. I'm only going to repeat once. Peter studied for his science test. Number 3, we are in a hurry, so please keep up. Jim asked, "Where is my pencil?" Jim asked, "Where is my pencil?" Very last question, and I'm not going to repeat it. I hope you're paying attention. Given a list of 1 or 2 syllable second grade words containing short vowels, Debbie will, without prompting, be able to decode those words with 95% accuracy. All right, thanks, Deborah. Nobody's loud. The thing I hate about doing this online, I can't see anybody's faces and I can't tell how you're feeling. But anyway, I roll. Thank you very much. No.
Kathy, I'm going to tell you how I did on this. I have a left-right imbalance because I am on the autism spectrum.
Yeah.
And so I can carry a baby in my left arm, but not my right. And I can write with my right hand, but not my left. So this definitely, I can't read anything I wrote.
Okay.
And I got 3 out of 4 sentences down, but I didn't even attempt the last one.
Exactly. So you guys all wanted to give up and all that kind of stuff. That's what happens to these kids. They can't keep up. You know, it's not, I mean, their handwriting looks messy because they're spending so much energy trying to get those words out onto the paper that they couldn't give a crap about what they're sorry for the swearing or whatever you want to call that language. But you know, their idea of neatness goes out the window. Punctuation, forget about it. It's all about just trying to keep up, especially if the teacher's like, come on, come on, come on, or they just don't even do it, right? Those are the kids that are going to be putting their hands up all the time to ask to go to the bathroom, or they get stomach aches. It slows them down. It makes their processing speed is slower. Their working memory is smaller. So, yes, exactly, Sandra. Like it was ridiculous. I mean, I was having a hard time reading it. So, it's just that the whole exercise is just to make you feel like you can't keep up, right? That's the main thing that happens to these kids. So, we can do one more exercise like this. My favorite one is not the best to do in a group, but 4 sentences was much longer. I was like, arg, yeah. Yeah. Do you want to do one more writing simulation, or do you want to go into more of my presentation? Yeah, like a mirror. Yeah, you're right. Here, we'll do one more writing and then we'll go into the presentation. Okay, so you can use your dominant hand right now. And I'd love it if you could write a paragraph about what you did this morning. Just any old thing, 4 sentences. You know, you got out of bed, fed your cat, listened to music, ate oatmeal, and went to school, or whatever you did. I'll give you 4 minutes to write that. because of the time, I'll just give you 1 more minute to write.
Here's some information.
Whoops. Okay, we'll stop writing here. So I'm gonna pick on someone else here. How about Sandra Nelson?
And
How
then
hard-
Fenton Fong also put up his hand, I think.
Okay, well, Fenton, you go. How hard did you find this? Was it, a scale of 1 to 10?
Well, it was not anywhere near as hard as the previous exercise, of course. It was hard because I and probably everybody else here doesn't write much anymore. We all type. So,
Oh, right.
yeah. I mean, I write a little bit, so I write, but my handwriting has definitely gotten worse since we all type now and use computers. Yeah, but the previous exercise was definitely very impactful on me.
Okay, but how, and like coming up with your ideas and stuff, like the problem was mainly the fact that you weren't using technology. It wasn't like
Yeah.
you couldn't think about what you wanted to put on paper, and it would have been there if you had the computer, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I didn't find it that difficult.
Okay. Does anybody else want to answer? Sherry?
I was going to ask partway through if I was supposed to be using my right or my left hand.
Okay.
Was I using my non-dominant hand?
You were using your dominant hand.
Oh yeah, I was using my dominant hand. I realized that I don't have a very interesting morning. I didn't know what to write about. And then I did find myself sounding like my dyslexic kid because it's like, I don't know what to write about. So. Okay.
Because it was boring, but you had time to think about other things because it was just a boring exercise.
I did. I wrote a lot about the cat. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. So we're going to make it harder then. This was the easy one. So one more time, you can still use your dominant hand, but we're going to put some restrictions on you. So you're going to write about what you did yesterday. And you cannot use the words A and B for have in of that the two, and spelling words substitute T for every time you use the B, and A for letter O. So honestly, like, think about what you want to write and then do all these silly substitutes, and I'll give you 2 minutes. You don't even have to write anything, just I want you to think about it and think about, how hard it is afterwards. All right, so we'll go for just 2 minutes here. Okay, it's not quite 2 minutes, but we'll call it time. All right, so this was the hard version, and I think it's probably harder than what dyslexics go through, but I'm going to ask a few questions before I give some analysis here. But did anybody have any strategies to get through this? Anybody?
I looked back and forth
You looked back and forth. Okay.
between what I'm writing, like letter by letter, and the rules. And I had to think about it each letter, like
That's
not
right.
each word, but each letter.
That's exactly what a dyslexic person does. They think about it pretty much every single letter and they look back and forth. So anybody else with strategies? Oh,
I was pretty much the same. Like, I have a pretty good memory, so I was able to remember that B and O are different letters. But I had checking what letters I wasn't allowed to use. I mean, what words.
Okay, so yeah, they're double checking everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, even get started.
Lots of, oops, sorry.
That's okay, Sherry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, just like lots of like scratching out mistakes, because you know, I realized I'd done it wrong. Very, very interrupted writing, like just not fluid, like not fluid at all, just constant, like, yeah. So then there's no flow. And the meaning almost gets lost because you're more obsessed with the coding activity than actually there's, you know, it kind of makes sense why it's hard to really express yourself.
Yeah,
you're so busy worried about like how the letters work.
Exactly. Very slow and a lot of thinking. It's exactly all of these points you guys are bringing up are exactly what happened to dyslexic kids. They have trouble decoding. They have poor working memory. It doesn't mean that they don't have memory. It just, the poor working memory is the memory that you need in the moment when you're learning. These kids need lots of repetition to get it put in their long-term memory, which they usually have good long-term memory. I did working memory. Yeah, correct. So these kids, they're easy to notice in a classroom, because if you ask them what they did yesterday or this morning, they'll come up with short sentences. I fed the dog, that type of thing. So they're very literal because that's the easiest thing for them to be. One of a kind of a joke that I like to remember, a friend of mine, they took their nephew who's dyslexic out for lunch, and she said to him, okay, I'll take you anywhere as long as you spell the restaurant that you want to go to. So she was thinking, you know, I don't know, White Spot or whatever. Anyways, the child speaks up and says, let's go to KFC. So they're quite bright, you know. They think they will, if they have time to think, they'll think of something, you know, that is nice and short and sweet. You know, if you ask a child who's dyslexic what they did in the summer, and they may have gone on a month-long camping trip with the family, and they may have gone to the Grand Canyon, and it was enormous and hot and all these things. And what you might only find out with what they're when they actually write about is, you know, yeah, it was hot and we went camping or something like that, because they will transpose it into the smallest amount possible, so that you might not get everything that's going on in there if you don't give them some accommodations. And I mean, somebody brought up the fact that, you know, if they use their technology, their typing, it's a lot easier. And it is easier for dyslexic kids. It's more tactile when you're typing than it is to actually do handwriting. It is, they talk about when you teach students with dyslexia to read and write, it's really good to use multisensory. Well, basically typing is multisensory. So it is a really good way to get their ideas out, is if you're typing or use voice technology, speech to text, and then get them to edit their work from there, so that they're not struggling with the spelling of words and the grammar and all that kind of stuff. Just get those ideas out and then work on the logistics later, because these kids, to actually get a learning disability diagnosis, you have to have at least average intelligence. So you really want to get to that intelligence and allow them to get to their intellectual capability by giving them some accommodations. Yeah, cursive. Yeah. So, any other questions about these simulations? Okay, we'll move on. So accommodations, like we were just talking about, speech to text, scribe, a word bank, or a word list. So this one came up recently, actually, for a student. I do get phone calls from parents of kids that are in university, post-secondary, and the child or young adult was taking something like psychology, where there was lots of really big words. Print mine, I guess, fail. Whoops, sorry. Whoop. So a word list would be, my son used to get a word list when he did Shakespeare in high school. So those names, like in Romeo and Juliet, those names that you don't often, use in everyday 20th century writing. So he would get a sheet of paper in the resource room that would have like maybe 100 names on it. So only a person who actually knew the names of the characters would know, the actual word he was looking for. So, and the same with math, you can have like a word bank or a formula list. And you can have like 100 different formulas. So the student that knows the formula is going to be able to pick it out of the list. So it's not really a cheat sheet. As one university said to the parent when they were helping their child advocate to have this thing for a psychology exam, it literally is just a list of things, and the only person who knows the answer, only the person who knows the answer would be able to pick out the right answer, if that makes any sense. Text. Yeah, that's correct. Okay, so what are accommodations versus remediation? So this kind of is out of place, this thing, but this slide. So dyslexia is not poor eyesight. We already talked about this. Some people come to me and say vision therapy, covered overlays, and that type of thing. That doesn't work for dyslexia. It might work for problems with vision, but not for a processing issue. Like a color on top of words is not going to change the way you see the words. It might maybe relax you a little bit. I'm not opposed, and most people who know about the science of reading are not opposed to like using different color to sort of relax. Rather, it's like sleeping in a room that's colored light blue or a cool color rather than a bright yellow. Certain colors are going to relax you more than others, and it's the same, I think, when you're reading. You don't want to be reading shiny print or shiny letters or that kind of thing. Yeah, Erland's syndrome. Yeah. It's a developmental disability. It's not acquired, so it doesn't mean that, somebody who has a stroke doesn't get dyslexia. They might get which I think it's called aphasia, when you have a stroke and then you have trouble reading and that type of thing. It's not a degenerative disease. It's not a lack of education opportunity, result of laziness on the part of student. And it is a medical, it isn't a medical condition, but it is a medical diagnosis. I guess when I say condition, meaning illness, it's not an illness. It's just the way, it's kind of like somebody who is naturally very strong. Their muscles are naturally very strong. They're just built that way. That's the same with dyslexia. You're just built that way. You're born with blue eyes. You're born with dyslexia. You're born with muscles that are, very strong. Here's a list of good books to read about dyslexia. I recommend Overcoming Dyslexia by Dr. Sally Shaywitz. She's from Yale University. Not Stupid, Not Lazy, Understanding Dyslexia and Other Learning Disabilities. This is Linda Siegel. She's from UBC. Mark, you might like this book. It's called Nowhere to Hide, Why Kids with ADHD and LD Hate School and What We Can Do About It. I've seen present, he is very funny and his book is easy to read. So that's a really great one. Here's some resources in terms of this, you could use them for remediation or as accommodations. So this immersive reader is really great for, you can literally just take a picture from the screen and put it into immersive reader and it can read for you. Grammarly, I use it all the time. Sela is a Canadian audiobook subscription. Most of the Vancouver, like Lower Mainland libraries do have access to Sela. And it's really great because you can just order the books online. SetBC and ArcBC are through the ministry, and you can get digitalized formats to put into text to speech. So you can go to your resource teacher and say, can we contact SetBC and get like any textbook in the BC curriculum is all digitized through SetBC or ArcBC. I can't remember which. Lexia and Nessie and MindPlay are all online programs for remediation. I'd say Lexia and MindPlay is probably better for older students. Lexia is probably good for younger students and middle school students. And Nessie, I would say, is probably more like a video game and is a good supplement. All three of these are sort of supplements. I wouldn't use them to replace one-to-one tutoring or one-to-one support. Inspiration software is great. It's a great mapping tool. So it's great for writing. So you want to use it for the Kidspiration is the kid version, so primary school, and Inspiration is for adults or like high school. Reading Assistant, I haven't seen it for a while, but it actually, you can read to it and it corrects you. So my daughter used it when she was about grade 6, and she used it for her home reading assignments. So here's a resource list. Continued. I will send this to Karen so that she can post it alongside of like a resource list so that we don't have to go through all of this while we're there's been a huge lot of, remember I told you we got this isn't the proclamation. I wanted to talk to you about what's been going on in BC in terms of dyslexia advocacy and that sort of thing. DyslexiaBC has been around for about 10 years. I've probably been advocating for about 20 years in BC, between my two kids, and then eventually forming DyslexiaBC. And there hasn't been a lot that's happened, even though we've met with the last 4 education ministers. They usually don't answer us after we meet them, or they'll write back saying teachers can choose what they want to teach and that sort of thing, which is very frustrating from our perspective, because most families that come to us, or the people on our board, we've all had to pay for resources, and it's getting a little tiring, because it should be available in public schools. We shouldn't feel like we have to. Child with autism and ADHD. Oh yeah, for sure. These lists of resources for sure could be for autism or ADHD. So you can have a look at the resource list, or I can send an email or something through Karen, for you guys to get access. My website, our website, DyslexiaBC website, has a list of all the resources that I showed before as well. So right before December the 7th, I had submitted a Freedom of Information request asking how much extra money. And you probably all know there's several private schools in the Lower Mainland that specialize in dyslexia. There's Fraser Academy, there is Kenneth Gordon, there's one in Maple Ridge called James Cameron, and Collingwood School, which is in West Vancouver, had a specialized program, but from what I understand, they've now disabled it. They don't run it the same way anymore. So these schools, Collingwood did not, but the 3 that I mentioned first all got an extra $2,000 per student. And so I wanted to know how much money these schools were actually getting. So I put for the last 10 years, I asked them for each of these schools, how much money did they get that public schools don't get? And it was a lot of money. So the day that I got that Freedom of Information request back was December the 5th. And this new mandate that new Premier Ebby wrote, Honorable Ebby wrote to the Honorable Minister Singh, said that he mentioned dyslexia a couple times. So with support from the Parliamentary Secretary for Accessibility, continue providing supports to children and youth with disability and special learning needs. Continue to work with boards of education to ensure all students have support they need to be successful. And it said something about dyslexia specifically. So I was over the moon because of this. So afterwards, I wanted to go to the funding. They have debates in the legislature about funding. So I wrote and I wrote and I wrote. Do you think anybody answered me? No, not one person. And I kept saying, I'm really excited about this dyslexia initiatives that you talked about. I'd love to identify opportunities to expand services and interventions for kids with dyslexia and related learning differences. I didn't hear back. So fast forward, and the VSB, your DPAC here, helped us with this. Along my journey, I've helped lots of families and all over the place. There were a few districts that I knew would have interest in trying to get some dyslexia type motions passed. So it was Kootenay Lake, SD8, their DPAC. Those kids, they have very little access to anything to do with dyslexia. The one family that I'd been talking to, their son is now in grade 8. He still doesn't have a diagnosis. So it's pretty crazy to think that. My youngest was diagnosed when she was in grade 1. So, and it's been the best thing we ever did, because she's at university and she still reads at a 2nd grade level, but we pretty much did everything we could do to get her there and it helped. She's successful, happy, and but still very dyslexic. So these 3 motions that passed were between the BCC PAC and the BCSTA, and the BCC PAC passed the one for structured literacy in all classrooms. And the BCC PAC also did number 3, literacy centers in all districts in BC. Currently, there's only a few districts that have literacy centers. The VSB has a few, Coquitlam has one, North Vancouver has one. But you know what? Vancouver and Coquitlam, they're in grade 4 and 5. Well, in grade 4, pretty much that's when all your remediation opportunities end. So it takes 4 times longer to remediate a student if you try to help them after grade 4. So we really, really want early intervention. And the best way to get that is with the motion that the BCSTA passed, which is literacy screening starting in kindergarten. So all of these 3 things, if we turn them into legislation and actually each district has these things, we would be set up to be proactive in providing literacy interventions. And the structured literacy is the science of reading, and it is the most up-to-date way to teach reading. And BC schools just aren't up to date. It's just ridiculous. You can imagine how many times the computer systems have been updated in our school systems over the last 30 years. Just imagine how many times. How many times have they updated the literacy curriculum? Not once. So you'd think something as important as reading and teaching our kids to read, they'd have the most up-to-date science, but they don't. So that's something we really need to work on and fix. In the United States right now, out of all the states but one, I think it's Hawaii, have all made legislation pertaining to screening and the use of science of reading. So Canada's behind. They've been making this legislation for 10 years and we don't have any legislation to date. So on October 3rd, I don't know why this isn't working. October 3rd, DyslexiaBC, we had an event at the legislature and we called it Say Dyslexia at the BC legislature. And we had 8 speakers, including students. This is Finn and this is Kate and this is Tierney. Tierney's in grade 9, Finn's in grade 8, and Kate is 22. She's in 4th year at the University of Vancouver Island University. And we basically invited all the MLAs in the entire province to come and hear us speak. We also had Rick Moore from the Landmark Moore case. And we told them, we want screening, we want to be identified, we want the science of reading in all our classrooms. We did have a meeting in, that's Honorable Rashna Singh's office, where she gave us the this was the whole day. It was a beautiful sunny day. It was awesome. And this is when she gave, I don't know why my pictures aren't working. Sorry. I had a picture of the proclamation, but it's just not showing up. It wasn't written exactly the way I wanted. There were things taken out of it, and we were given something, but it definitely wasn't what we asked for. There have been issues with getting IEPs in the last couple of years, and there have been issues with families being told that they can't have an IEP because they have a Q designation. And I don't know how much that happens in the Vancouver district. I'm sure you've all heard about the right to read inquiry coming out of Ontario. I have been quiet up until about the last couple of weeks about that inquiry. One of the let's see it. I'm pretty sure I put, here we go. This is from the Right to Read Inquiry. The number one goal for the Right to Read Inquiry was universal design for learning. So I've actually written to the Human Rights Commission and said to them just last week, actually, why, if this Right to Read Inquiry was for the rights of dyslexic students or for kids to read, why was universal design for learning the number one goal for the right to read? So I obviously don't have an answer from that, but I did get a response. So I will be having a meeting about that, because universal design for learning is about accommodations and making sure that kids get access to the classroom. And what I've been hearing from families, there's some districts worse than others, that they're being told by the school districts that they can't have an IEP anymore because of the school district using universal design for learning, or that Q designation doesn't get an IEP because they are using universal design for learning. Well, universal design for learning is for a regular classroom. It's not, remember at the beginning of my presentation where I said I like to use the word disability? Disability is its own thing, and you have rights based on disability. So a universal design for learning isn't going to meet the needs of disability. I agree with all of these other things, but I just do not understand why they had to have universal design for learning in there. It's just beyond me.
Can
I will, sorry, go ahead.
I was wondering if I could make a comment, Cathy.
Yeah.
Just related to that, I find it really interesting that, you know, a year ago, my kid was eligible for extra support, and now I'm being told that he doesn't need extra, you know, human support because there's universal design for learning.
Yeah.
Like, to me, it's just a way not to give kids the human support that they need. They do need specialized interventions, and that's human. Like, it's labor, it's people. That's what it takes to help kids, to give them the remediation that they need and the support they need for complex learning tasks.
The inquiry is a government initiative. It's not like the Moore case where Moore said, I am going to do this because there's a systemic issue here and I want to fix this systemic issue. Basically, the inquiry, the government would have chosen the parameters that they wanted to get out. Like, it's a government initiative. And they interviewed teachers. They interviewed teachers just as much as they interviewed the families. So, you know, if it truly is about the person's disability, do you think they would say it was something for autism? Would they go around and interview a whole bunch of doctors that service autism individuals? No, they go to the person with the disability. They don't ask the caregivers. They might ask a few of them, but so I think that the results might be skewed in a certain way that might not represent the actual needs of the people with the disabilities. So I'm going to leave it there. Another thing that's happened in BC is this arbitration agreement in 2019. It's been pretty quiet and about it, but I get anonymous letters sent to me. So there's been a few anonymous letters sent to me that have sort of made me look into this a little bit more. So the things that came out of the arbitration agreement in 2019 were J category. There used to be a J category in 1995 for kids with learning disabilities. So if you look at this, number 3, restored class composition provisions refer to severe learning disabled and or category J students apply only to students who would have been included in category J under the 1995 manual. Students currently in category Q who would not have been included in J category in 1995 are not designated or special needs students for the purposes of interpreting restored class composition provisions. So basically, they've changed the Q category since 2019, and they haven't really told parents. So the districts, from the emails that I've gotten, have been doing things to that Q category. And I think there might be a number of Q category students that aren't designated, and the parents just don't know. So anybody here on this call hearing this message, I would write your principal and outright ask them if your child has been designated with the BC Ministry of Education as a student with special needs with a Q designation. I would outright ask them that and let them give you a yes or no answer. And Sherry, I would ask that too, because maybe that's why your son isn't getting the help. Maybe
well, I'm just wondering, did they go, because I know for this arbitration, they did go through, they were going through the designations. Were some kids stripped of their designation?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, so how do you know?
I know because of this.
Like how would somebody know if their kid's been stripped of their designation?
By asking.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So what I'm telling you all is you need to ask. And I've been escalating this question for a few months now, and I still don't have a direct answer. I've been told that Vancouver, Surrey, and Coquitlam all took kids out of the Q category without telling parents. Now that is a hearsay thing, but I'm telling you as an advocate to please write your principal and ask if your kid's been designated.
Deborah has a question for you.
Deborah?
Okay. I was told by a resource teacher who asked that I not use their name, that the VSB or the ministry, he wasn't sure which, but was pushing to get rid of all designations. And it's not Q. And they said that this can be done without families notifications, and even if the student has a designation by a psychologist or other clinical professional, as well as it can be done over the objections of the family and the medical professional.
Yeah.
That they are doing that for everything, for dyslexia, for autism in some cases, for gifted or other special needs. And this resource teacher actually had a child with an IEP and was told that child didn't need, in elementary school, was told that a child didn't need the IEP anymore because the school was getting rid of the designations.
Yeah. Well, I think the ministry is angling that way, and this is what I think it's going to be replaced with universal design for learning. So going forward, as an advocate, I'm just make sure you write everything down, and that disability, we need to keep that language because it's not a bad word. My cousin who's a quadriplegic, he is disabled, and there's no question he's a lawyer. He went to university. He's very smart. It doesn't mean he's any less of a person. We just can't let people, like the ministry is always, differently abled people. Well, what does that mean? They're trying to change the language that they're using. They're saying because it's more politically correct or whatever. The word disabled doesn't take away. Yeah, exactly. So we need to be careful and not snowballed into changing certain things so that we lose our rights. That's what I'm trying to get at. So I question the right to read because it is a government initiative, and I question, like, it says right here that the kids won't be qualified for Q category. Has anybody been told that they're going through the Q designations? No, but I've got documents sent to me, and I'm happy to share with anybody a redacted copy of one of the letters I got. Sherry, in fact, I think I sent it to you. It's just, you know, a mind-boggling. And, you know, you ask the districts, oh no, it's all going to be fine, don't worry, don't worry. Well, no, my kid who's now at university, she did start out at an American school. We had geared her whole, we were hoping she would get a Div 1 sports scholarship, which she did, and she played for a school in Virginia, but then COVID hit. I said to them, do I need another psych ed done? They said, no, just your IEP, that's fine. Well, if BC is not going to do IEPs anymore, you know, what does that mean on the world scale when other countries like the US and other places all use IEPs and they all have systems with disability and we're the only one not? I mean, I agree with the idea that it could be more inclusive, but where it's going to be a problem is for the ones that really do need it and it's severe. It just doesn't make much sense to me. What if it has been stripped? What do we do then? Well, give me a call and we'll talk to them about that. Well, one thing at a time. You were talking about Know Your Rights, the document. Maybe could I have a look at whatever you're producing and I'll give you a hand and see if I can add anything to it.
Our Know Your Rights is specifically to the school liaison officers, so the police in the schools. But we're happy to produce another Know Your Rights and even a series of Know Your Rights as we go. So if you have interest in that, I'll definitely talk to you about that.
There is a really good Know Your Rights. It's written by somebody named, and it's in my resource list, called Cathy, spelled C-A-T-H-I-E, Camley. And she's got a little booklet and it's online, Know Your Rights. And it's all about IEPs and where to look for like what laws pertain to your IEPs and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, so that's a good Know Your Rights. So I'm going to quickly go through. So these level 3, there's 12 designations, right? The 3 levels that get funding are nicely, this is taken a screenshot from the government website. So the ones that do not get funding and are included in the basic allocation, which are kids with mild intellectual disabilities, learning disabilities, moderate behavior, or mental illness, students who are gifted. So those 4 are not included in funding. They're supposed to be dealt with the basic allocation, which isn't much, right? Learning disabilities, that is the umbrella term. 80% of all learning disabilities, 80 to 90% actually is dyslexia, but for some reason, schools like to say learning disabilities. I don't remember what was on this. Yeah, this was the beginning of the right to read. And it talks about more, and I don't know why the right to read actually talks about more so much, because more was actually more was more about the special learning literacy center, the remediation center. That was what was going to give him access to reading, not the stuff that's happening in the classroom. And what's happened with this right to read inquiry is special interest groups, i.e. groups that are training teachers to teach reading in a general classroom, have kind of got a hold of this right to read. And they're trying to make it all about just changing instruction in the regular classroom, when more was actually about that literacy center, like the ones that are in the VSB that don't start till grade 4 or 5. The one in North Vancouver actually starts in grade 2 or 3. So even that isn't early enough. We need literacy centers in grade 1 and 2 to get those kids like Jeffrey Moore reading at an earlier age. I do know Rick Moore, who's the dad of Jeffrey Moore, and Jeff is about the same level of severity as my kid. So yeah, nothing will help these kids more than early intervention. And they both graduated. Like Jeffrey graduated, and he first he's now a fireman, but he was first a plumber, and he used to have to go back to the office and dictate his, like, you know, how most people would, you know, nowadays write their day's work on an iPad and submit it all and email it to work. He would actually have to go back to the office in North Vancouver and physically tell the secretary everything he did and have her type up his daily activity at work. And that was part of what he had to do as his accommodation. He was still very dyslexic when he worked, and he went through a couple of employers before he found somebody that was willing to work with him. So he went all the way through Fraser Academy, and he graduated, and he still needed his accommodations. It wasn't like his dyslexia magically went away. He was just trained to deal with them. And he actually needed more remediation, which was what the Moore case was about, not just what happens in an everyday classroom. So this is this $2,000 that I was talking about. It's designated special education schools eligible for an additional special education grant of $2,000 per kid. So that means they're getting $2,000 per kid for Q designation kids at Fraser Academy, on top of the $44,000 a year that they charge.
And just to be clear, that's money that's not available in the public system. Like there's no equivalent in public schools.
Yeah.
Just in the private schools.
So like I said, I did this Freedom of Information request, and this is some of the information I got. I did it back for 10 years. So this would have been last year. So Kenneth Gordon got this much money that a public school wouldn't get. James Cameron, and there's good old Fraser Academy. On top of the other special education grants. So these are categories C, D, E, F, G. Those are all categories that generate special education funding. So they're not just taking dyslexic students. They are taking, G is for autism. D is for medical needs. So say a child with diabetes that needs a pump and a nurse to come in and visit every day or something like that. That would be a D designation. I can't remember what F, E, and C are off the top of my head right now, but this is the kind of money these schools are getting from the government. That's crazy. And this is the money that should be given to public schools as well, not just private schools. As an aside, the old principal at Kenneth Gordon School, one day I was saying that universal design isn't, you know, I don't want it for my kids. I want them to have proper remediation before given UDL. And he, of course, he's retired from Kenneth Gordon, and what he does is he goes around in the States and he's trying to sell universal design for learning. So let me see. So I looked up. So this is part of a presentation. I took screenshots. He sent me his presentation because he's like, oh, universal design for learning is wonderful. Look at what I've just presented this in the US. So the mandate for Kenneth Gordon School to serve students with learning challenges, not disabilities, challenges, to develop, apply, assess research-based programs for working with students with special education designations to prepare students for effective inclusion and reintegration into mainstream schooling. So it's not remediation. So want to give you some of my own personal context, and we've actually been through 8 different schools. We knew my daughter was dyslexic with severe dyslexia in grade 1. We had her in a private school for grade 3. We pulled her out. So she got tutoring every day in grade 3. Her reading levels did not go up. She went back to public for grade 4 or 5, and then we put her back in private for grade 6. And so grade 3 was the only year she had sort of intervention, if you want to call it, every single day. Fast forward to grade 12, her reading levels didn't go up by any means. The only time it went up was in a public school remediation facility in grade 5. In 3 months, her reading levels went up. And I'll tell you, it was not Orton Gillingham, went up an entire year. Okay, I don't know if I'm keeping up with the questions here. Okay, Andrea, I see your thing about they get 50% less, but they get an extra 2,000 that we do not get. And for instance, Fraser Academy gets 44,000 from the parents on top of that. So it's not, we're not talking apples to apples here at all. Okay, so Kenneth Gordon, they're there to provide effective inclusion. That's their main mandate. And this was his idea of what the money's for. 44,000 level 1 for full-time SCA, level 3 for quarter-time SCA. And it was interesting. He wrote, and I thought I put it in here, he wrote that the government gives us this extra money so that it makes it more affordable for parents. Let me see if I thought I put it here. We receive government funding to increase financial accessibility for families. All provincial funding is pooled to provide a breadth of service to every student. One of 15 designated special education schools in the province of BC. So it's interesting that the principal of a special needs school in BC says that the government gives them this money to make it more accessible for families. So, you know, really? Fast forward. So Fraser Academy, I don't know if you've heard, but they have been lobbying the government for $100 million. So this is a screenshot of the funding that they've requested. So Fraser Academy Association, they've requested $100 million. This was last year in December. They gave somebody, Premier Ebby's, I guess probably his chief of staff, I don't know what Dulcie's position is now, flowers, $82 worth of flowers for helping them get some meetings. They've met with all of these people within the ministry, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, more than once, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 3 times with Ebby to ask for this $100,000. So I wrote a letter last week and I said, why? This is ridiculous. In a much more polite way. Why would you even consider? Well, they're not going to, I got a phone call on Friday. I didn't get an email back. I got a phone call saying, look, we won't give them the money. And I said, well, that's great. You telling me you're not giving them the money, but why have you met with them so many times? And they didn't have an answer at all. And I said, why would you lead them to believe that they could maybe even get the money? And the fact is they don't even provide. So this is this is Fraser Academy's, this is their goals. This is from their goal page. So children and youth with dyslexia deserve the opportunity to thrive in education and excel in life. As a nonprofit organization, we serve a vital community need, empowering students and educators across Vancouver. We are leaders in education. We think dyslexia. When we think dyslexia, we think potential. Do you see remediation anywhere on there? I do not see that. And same with grades 1 to 6, grades 7 to 9, grades 10 to 12. They are focusing on potential, not on remediation. So even in their vision statement, in their mission statement, we celebrate the unique strengths of individuals with dyslexia and language-based learning differences, empowering children and youth with choice and opportunity. Well, choice isn't remediation. Choice isn't learning to read. Anyways, that's Karen said get political, and I just got a little bit political. So at the very end here, I'm just going to kind of give you my story, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen and just talk to you. Okay. Here we are. I can see Sherry. You're filling my screen. So I will take a minute and then open the floor for questions. It's been a long road for my family, having 2 kids with dyslexia. My oldest is also gay. Earlier, like when he was still in high school, Soji was just coming out. And to be honest, even Soji kind of bothered me a little bit because we've forked out hundreds of thousands of dollars to get our kids both reading. So my child with severe dyslexia, they're both bright and probably, if we had tested, would have been on the gifted end of things. But one was very dyslexic, one was mild to moderately dyslexic. And both ways I had to fight to get them the education they deserved. Both of them. We've had the youngest, my oldest went all the way through public school and graduated. He graduated from UBC on the honor roll. But if we didn't get him proper intervention and proper remediation, even with his mild to moderate dyslexia, he wouldn't have got there. I think he would have graduated. He probably would have done about the same as me. I graduated with thoughts of never going back to university. Thank you very much. It was a struggle for me being undiagnosed. But he liked going to school. He liked it. He figured out what he needed to do to be successful. I still struggle with reading. I think the diagnosis for both of them was the best thing we ever did. Like I said at the very beginning of this, I think to get around something, you need to embrace it, you need to own it, and you need to call it out. You need to address it. It's not just something you just lightly go, oh, that's not a big deal. You know, no, you can't run a marathon if you're overweight and your foot turns in too much. You know, you need to do something about it. You need to figure out how to get accommodations. You need to work. Running a marathon is exactly like reading remediation. It's hard work. You know, you have to figure out where your strengths are. You have to figure out where your weaknesses are, and you have to figure out a plan to figure out how to get there. It's not just something that happens overnight. It's not just, oh, well, let's just get some Morton Gillingham in here and let's just, you know, do it once a week. It doesn't work that way. You have to figure out exactly where you need the targeted remediation. 8 different schools for the little one. And I would say that we had probably just as many problems with the private schools, and we were at 2 of them. We didn't get accepted at 2 of them. So I went through all 4 of those institutions almost got her kicked out. I'll say that out loud. Because I was always saying, can we have more remediation? I think we've skipped that part. Can we have more remediation? And they would say things like, we're a program. We're a program. So we need more in the public system. We do need more in the public system. And I think we need it to be coming from a well-planned, not haphazard, a well-planned, thought out, top-down initiative so that it gets set up properly and equitably across the province. So that's where I will end. So Sherry, I can see your mind's turning a little bit there. Do you want to say anything?
I mean, I don't really have anything to add. I mean, I am deeply concerned about the resources that go into the private system, and there was some discussion in the comments there in the chat about, you know, the public system kind of forces you into the private system. We've all had, because our kids don't get the interventions that they need, we have to go outside and either if you don't, then you can't wait. Like, you just can't wait. There's no waiting. So you go and you do whatever you can, you pay whatever money you can, and you try to get, you know, do the best you can, and you fight in the public system. But it's a really exhausting, hard fight with a lot of failure on your
Well, all I'm trying to say is the private one is pretty much the same. Like, you ask for more remediation or whatever. Like, if you don't get there till you're in grade 8 and they've already done whatever remediation earlier grades, you're not going to get it.
But
right?
I am concerned with the outsourcing of the expertise. Like, I'm concerned that the VSB seems to think that they need to spend money on Fraser Academy in order to get the expertise. What I would like to see is our public school system strengthen itself by putting the resources here and training the teachers and training specialized, you know, instructors to have specialized tools.
I completely agree.
Just stop.
One of the legislative things that they've been doing in the States is making laws that each school district has to have a dyslexia reading specialist. So I would like to see that happen here as well, so that because Fraser Academy isn't a specialist with all types of reading. You know, they're, like I said, they're a bit of a program. They only accept kids that they know. If you look at their website, it's like, we're to get your kid to post-secondary, right? So they're a university prep school, basically, right? So they might not be a remedial specialist.